Okay. Does that mean that I start now? I'm not sure if I
Yeah.
follow the directions properly. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar, whether you're joining us live or on the replay. My name is Sandy Sholima, as you can see, it's written there. And I live in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And just to make sure you're all in the right place, webinar is called Moving Forward / Plunging Ahead. This is taking place in the last day of World Childless Week, a week-long forum dedicated to people who are childless, not by choice. So myself and the three other panelists here will just be having approximately an hour-long conversation about, you know, what happened in terms of our childless experience and what was it like moving on? Like, what was that all about? And then where we are now in terms of, how is our life at this point in time and how do we relate to our childlessness? And if we have time, there might be some words, hopefully, of encouragement or hope to, maybe help people who are still struggling with this. And as Stephanie mentioned, at the end, if there's a bit of time to answer a question or two, or from the chat or from the question box, we could potentially get to that. But we'll just wait and see how that goes. So, just to start off with, I think it would be good for everybody to introduce themselves. Uh, they can't say herselves. No, that's not a word. And it should be a word, though, as far as I'm concerned. And just your name, where you're from. I mean, you can see the name, but where you're from, and also just maybe a brief explanation or a brief minute or two to describe what is your participation been like in the childless community. Because I know all of us have been involved to some extent or another. And, just a brief resume or a brief summary of that. So anybody can jump in, it's popcorn style. I'm not going to point to people. So whoever wants to start can go ahead.
I'm quite happy to start. So my name is Palo Barker. I've been childless since 2002. My involvement in the community has only been in the last few years, mainly because I didn't know it had existed. And I'm involved in various support groups. I have provided support to people in different scenarios since the year 2000. And so it's something that I'm very passionate about, helping women deal with impossible situations, either medically or more latterly, childlessness, cope and move forward. So I'm very passionate in terms of helping people. And I do it on generally a one-to-one basis. People contact me directly. But as I say, I am involved with a couple of support groups as well.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I can go next. I'm Laura. I'm in Ontario, Canada, about an hour north of Toronto. I'm a music educator and a researcher. And I got involved with the Childless Not by Choice community in about 2018, I think it was, when I first discovered that there was such a thing, which was through Gateway Women. And that was derived from doing my research in my graduate studies on the topic of childlessness and singing, strangely enough. Since then, I've been really attempting to raise as much awareness as possible for the childless experience. A lot of it began on Facebook, on my personal page, and then from there, connecting with other women on all of the amazing pages that are run by the amazing women like Stephanie, and many others as well. And I've got a couple of meetup groups in this area as well, where I try to connect with women from Toronto and also London, Ontario, where I did my graduate studies. And yeah, I just want to, I'm hoping to keep going with advocacy stuff and branching out beyond social media now is kind of my next thing, and just to try and get the word out, as it were.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
Hey, hi everyone. My name's Rachel. I am in Derby in the UK. I am a part-time psychotherapeutic breath worker and part-time business improvement manager. So two very different jobs there. In my corporate job, I'm heavily involved in the diversity and inclusion alliance over there as our childless representative. So lots of activity, raising awareness and support for our community in a sort of a firm that's got around 40 to 45,000 people. And then as a part-time psychotherapeutic breath worker, I help lots of different people, but including people that are childless in my local community, mostly at the moment. I've been officially childless for around the last 6 or 7 years and involved more heavily in our community. Again, once I found out that there was one, because honestly, I thought I was the only woman in the world with this problem. About the last 18 months. But it's been a wild ride and I'm not getting off anytime soon.
Wow, that sounds really good. So I'll just reiterate my name, Sandy Sholema in Montreal, Canada. I should mention that in addition to identifying as childless, not by choice, I also identify as queer. And I also live with chronic health issues, which kind of, intersected with my childlessness as well. And like as was mentioned by Paolo and Rachel, it was only about 2 or 3 years ago that I discovered that there was a childless community, primarily through Facebook and through Stephanie's work with the World Childless Week. I'm a part-time researcher, and I consider my primary identity in terms of profession to be a writer, both a poet and other types of writing. And that is how I have participated mostly in the childless community, is by submitting written material, both to World Childless Week and to other forums, magazines and whatnot, that deal with childlessness. This is the first time that I'm hosting a webinar, so bear with me. But this year I decided to sort of up the ante a little bit in terms of my participation and to get a little more active in the childless community. So, and yeah, like Rachel mentioned, I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon either. So it's been a real, I'm an activist, and I have been an activist for a number of different causes. And I said to myself, how come I'm not an activist for this cause when it directly affects me, So I kind of had my own awakening about that kind of thing. So I'm very happy to be here. So to move on more to the subject of our webinar, if each of you could just briefly describe what your experience with childlessness was like sort of what happened, and also in particular, where did that leave you feeling in terms of feeling, about yourself, about your place in the world, about your future, whichever angle you want to sort of take that from. So once again, the floor is open, and I'm always going to go last, by the way. I just prefer to wait and hear what other people have to say first. So.
I'm happy to start this time. So my now ex-husband and I were unable to have children despite undergoing fertility treatments back in 2011. And after our final unsuccessful attempt, I was left feeling really lost and grieving what I now kind of identify as a potential identity of mother that had been a huge part of who I was since I was a child. I felt there was a massive void in my life and in my heart. And when I reached out to a psychotherapist in January of 2012, I was at a point where I was having suicidal thoughts every day, caused by my childlessness and the loss that I was feeling. I felt that life was incredibly unfair. I was torturing myself by going to baby showers for all of my close friends who were having children naturally, because I thought if I didn't, I'd be less of a friend to them. I felt like a failure as a daughter because I couldn't, give my parents the grandchildren that they'd always wanted and expected. I had no idea who I was supposed to be if not a mother. And as a cisgendered woman, I'd been raised with the belief that the most important thing I could ever accomplish in my life was to have children, and I'd failed. So I felt incomplete. My self-confidence and my self-worth were very, very diminished at that time.
Okay. By the way, just a question. Are you an only child, or?
No, I have 2 older brothers, but I am the only girl. So
Okay.
that was a different kind of pressure that I felt anyway from my mostly from my mom. But I mean, bless her heart, you know, that it's how she was raised in a traditional way, and her feelings and assumptions about what being a woman was were quite sort of traditional in the Western sense. So yeah.
Okay. So as a girl, there was a particular kind of expectation.
Certainly that I felt it, and was voiced, but never in a way of like, you must have children, but it was an assumption. It
Right.
was just how I functioned in that framework when I grew up. Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Mhm. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, shall I go next?
Sure.
So I just wanted to share with everyone that I made some notes about the sorts of things that I was going to share today, but I'm not present to them. So I'm probably just going to breathe and share what is there at the time. So bear with me as you witness my authentic truth. So yeah, since I was a young child, like probably lots of women, I wanted a couple of children. You know, success to me looked like being a mom, having kids, and I got married 12 years ago this year. And one of the first things I wanted to get down to was having babies. And it never occurred to me that it wouldn't just happen, you know, like it just seemed so normal. Oh, this is what you did, this is what people expected, this is definitely what I wanted. And it didn't. And over a number of years, there was a lot of trying and pressure and support and intervention. And um, despite it going over a number of years, I never really confided in anyone what was going on. So everything that was happening, and traumatic situations, bad news after bad news, and experiencing losses, I felt very alone. And there was a lot, I felt really shameful. And I didn't know where to turn with anything. Um, and then, yeah, 6 years ago, when it, you know, it was like, okay, that's the line, like my heart couldn't take anymore. And I was basically told there's no point in trying anyway. It was a dark, dark time. I really resonate with some of the things that you said, Laura. You know, I felt really worthless. I don't think I'd ever felt so much of a failure in my entire life. I felt really different. Like I said at the beginning, I was like, am I the only one in this? Everyone else seems to be having children. Everyone's definitely asking me when I'm having children, and all of the, you know, all of the comments that go along with that. And it was a very lonely time, a very, very dark time. And my body got more and more riddled with physical ailments and illnesses. And yeah, I drank heavily for a very long time. So yeah, I was angry. I was angry at the world, and it made me angry at everyone. And every time someone told me that they were pregnant with this spark, you know, this sparkle in their eyes, I felt like I died every time. And still I didn't tell anyone. So yeah, it was hard. It was hard. But I think that covers it in a nutshell.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. I can identify also a lot with both what you and Laura shared. How?
Yes, I certainly identify with the loss. Going back to my story, my journey actually finished absolutely pretty much as soon as it started. I just didn't know that at the time. We tried for a few years. The NHS declined to pay for IVF treatment, so we tried one cycle privately. That failed, and I was told that it would never work. And the only options were surrogacy or donated eggs, and had no idea how to approach that. I had been refusing treatment for my medical condition whilst we explored the trying to get pregnant route. And so we decided that that had to stop, and I would take up the treatment that I needed for my condition. And And then 2 or 3 years later, I had to have an emergency hysterectomy, and that absolutely was the end. So I felt a failure. I was frustrated and heartbroken. I had failed as a woman. I was broken. In my eyes, I was the lady of the lake. The curse was upon me. Everything in my life had crumbled. My health, my ability to be a mother, my work was just free fall because of my health. I spent the first 6 months just crying on and off. I ran out of a work conference where there were 200 colleagues, crying my eyes out, hysterical, because they played a song that triggered me. I was full of pain and sorrow at that time. And then over the years, that turned to rage and bitterness.
Well, thank you, all of you, for sharing that. I know it's not easy to recount those kinds of experiences in sort of the darkest periods of our lives, and I can really relate to a lot what's being shared. In my particular case, I actually did get pregnant when I was 26 years old, but I was an alcoholic. And I didn't think it was a good idea to bring a child into the world under those circumstances. So I had an abortion. And I figured, well, I'll have time later on. My mom had me when she was 38. One of my aunts had her child when she was in her early 40s. So I figured genes or genetics were on my side, And fast forward, I got sober. And between approximately the ages of 35 to around 42, I tried to conceive a child, firstly with my now ex-husband, and then with another individual after that. Obviously, it didn't work. And with the second person, I was in my late 30s, early 40s. By this point, there's fertility treatments, hormone treatments. I'm not sure of the exact letters of it, but artificial insemination. But they had done a ultrasound and saw that I had a lot of fibroids in my uterus, and they did exploratory surgery, and they closed me up. And, for the rest of my life, I will always remember the words of the gynecologist when she came to see me in the recovery room, and she said, "Y a rien qui va pousser là-dedans," which in French means there's nothing that's going to grow in there, because it was too extensive, the fibroid problem. And so it was, the word done and dusted. It was over. And yeah, I mean, I can so relate to what everybody was saying about feeling like a failure. I felt like the biggest failure on the face of the earth. And my brother, and I only have one sibling, has had 7 children. And his wife was just producing one after the other, like into her 40s, So I just felt so diminished, all the time. Each time that this was going on, I felt happy for them, but it was so hard in comparison, And yeah, I just felt like a lot of shame, and that somehow I'd been singled out, for bad luck. I also felt very angry because, to come out of alcoholism and to make all of that effort because you hope that you can have a better future. You hope that those efforts are going to be paying off somehow. And then to have to face yet another huge crisis in my life. I just, and I felt a lot of self-recrimination too, by the way. Like, why did I have that abortion? Why was I an alcoholic? I screwed it up when I had the chance, Also, the failure of 2 relationships coming into the mix, also coming to terms with being queer at that time. I mean, it was like, existential crisis beyond words, I also felt like I had no future. It was this big blank page, or just this murkiness, And just, yeah, I mean, basically that was it. I did have a job, and I managed to keep my job at a community center where I was, I have a bachelor's degree in social work, and I was, a coordinator for a program for immigrant women and whatnot. But even that wasn't enough to stop me from this hurricane of feelings, that were very, 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 very painful. And I would go into work, just wondering if I was going to make it through the day. Every single day thinking, Jesus, am I going to be able to make it through this day? And somehow I did, So that was my story of childlessness, which is, again, very, very difficult. But thankfully, this webinar is about moving forwards. And, to be able to move forwards from those types of feelings and experiences, I mean, I think we all deserve a great, like, congratulations for that, because it's not easy, as far as I can tell, as far as I've experienced. So to move on from that, how did you do it? What was that process like for you to have all that loss and pain and feeling failure, like a failure, and feeling shameful, and then to move forwards into focusing more on what you could have or what you do have, and to have, better feelings about yourself? What was that process like for you? Was it some big event that happened? Was it a gradual process? And also, I'd be interested in knowing, like, what permitted you to say yes to that moving forwards? Was it some personal attribute or specific help from particular people? So once again, you can kind of take that from whichever angle you would like to. Paolo, why don't you go first this time to sort of switch things up a bit?
Thank you. For me, it was a specific event. I even remember I was in the kitchen with my husband, and he turned round to me and he said, "You're so bitter. I don't even know who you are anymore." And I heard those words and they just cut me. And I thought, yes, he's right. I'm so angry. I'm so bitter. I hate the world, and I hate everybody in it, and I hate everything at the moment. And that really made me think, I don't like myself. This isn't who I want to be. I can't live like this for the rest of my life. I cannot live in this space of anger and pain and suffering. I can't do that. I can't be that person. And this was about 5 years after the IVF had failed. So I decided that's not who I was going to be. I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I had to forgive myself. I had to stop punishing myself. I had to tell myself that I was going to move forward. I wasn't going to live in this space anymore, because this space was killing me. It was just making me into such a hateful person. And so I needed to be kind to myself. I needed to forgive myself. I needed to be a friend to myself. And I needed to do that.
Thank you. How about I go next? I won't put myself last all the time. That okay with you gals?
Perfect.
For me, it was kind of a combination of a specific event and, other factors coming into play. As I mentioned, I was working in this community center, and I was a supervisor to a student who was in the social work program. And she had a professor coming in who was a liaison with the university, to talk about, how she was doing and all that. But for some strange reason, the conversation ended up focusing on me at the end of it. And this woman was very curious about my experiences. And she says, "Oh, you've got a lot of grassroots, community-based organizational experience." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, what was your grade point average in your bachelor's program?" And I'm thinking, where is she going with this? It almost seemed like she was trying to interview me or something, And then at the end of the conversation, she said to me, "You'd be a really good candidate for the master's program in social work at McGill University in Montreal, because we really need people who have that background in community-based, grassroots work. And I was just flabbergasted. I just like, this woman hardly knew me, And she said, listen, if you make the application, I'll look it over and I can help you tweak it here and there. And, if you get accepted, I can be your academic advisor and this and that. And I thought, wow, like, this is really amazing. Like I said, this woman hardly knows me and she's being so generous and offering this to me and whatnot. And, I think it was a question of timing also. But I said, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to at least try, and I think she really triggered something in me, that like, Paolo, you were saying like, who am I? What kind of person am I really? And for me, it was like that too. Excuse me. Am I this person, who has a very hard time even making it through the day, this kind of thing? But she saw something in me, obviously, and then that got me thinking that, when I was a little girl, I was very bold. And my mother used to give me examples of me. And that's why this webinar, I called it Plunging Ahead, moving forwards, plunging ahead. Because when I was a little girl, I was a bold little girl. I go, yeah, let's go, And somehow this woman triggered that in me, that, yeah, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to do this. Might not work out. I had some doubts. I have chronic illness. I haven't been in school in a long time. But she triggered that courageous, bold little girl that had been shoved down through all of the pain and all of the suffering and all of the difficulties. I'd lost touch with her, but she was still in there somewhere, and having the encouragement and the support of this woman was so key. And of course, support from other people, financial support from the government, from the university. So I think it was like a combination of things. And I think it was also a question of timing, because if she had showed up a year earlier, maybe I wouldn't have been ready for that kind of move, but I said yes. And I went on to do a master's degree and a PhD, which I finished in 2019. And, also she provided me with a future. Like I said, it was like a blank, murky page, and not a future forever, ever, but at least for the next couple of years, this is what you can work towards. And I just found the whole thing extremely inspirational. And, another thing too, she was focusing on my strengths. She wasn't saying, oh, by the way, you're childless and what's happened over here and how come you have these failed relationships and all that. She didn't care about that. She cared about my strengths. And that's why I felt so encouraged and inspired. And then that helped me move in that direction. So that's what I have to share on that.
Okay, I will go next then. So for me, I think I just mentioned I was drinking really heavily for quite a long time. And what galvanized me into changing was I went out one night, my husband and I went out with my aunt and her husband one night for a meal. And I did what I did all the time. I drank really heavily. When we got home, I don't remember any of it, but I passed out on the sofa. And when I woke up, I was alone. And I just remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. Like, breathing, but not being alive, not being connected to anyone. I hadn't actually had a feeling for a really long time because I'd been drinking so much, and my feelings, I had quite an interesting childhood and stuff before the childlessness came in. So I think I already felt really full when the childlessness came about. So I just didn't have any space for any more grief or anger or anything. So I just drank. So yeah, I woke up in that moment and I was like, I'm not drinking anymore. I'm so done. Like, I either need to really live or just die. Like, this is it. And yeah, I went on a bit of a program, 1 year no beer, if anyone's heard of it. And I did the first month, signed up for a month, and I didn't drink for a whole month, and it was hard, hard. And then when I was coming to the end of the month, I was like, oh no, I'm nowhere near done. So I signed up for the 3 months, and I went over Christmas, my birthday, New Year, and a wedding without drinking, and that's crazy. And then I think about the 4th month, I started having like the odd drink, like half a glass of wine or whatever. But it took me a couple of years to be able to sort of walk past our booze fridge without wanting to take a drink out of it, like any time of the day or night. And what happened was, when I stopped drinking, my body fell apart. All of the emotions and the trauma that I'd been holding down with the booze there was nothing to hold it down with anymore, and my jaw dislocated, and I couldn't talk and I couldn't eat, and Andy had to mash my food up for me to eat and stuff. And yeah, it was just the time, like, I was just ready to change, and it wasn't easy. But what detox is, and I think there's a detox from alcohol, but there's also, you know, when you have to turn around and face your reality when it isn't what you wanted it to be, and you need to process your past. It's not that fun when it comes out, but once it's out, oh my goodness, are you lighter on the other side? And yeah, I met a breath worker. Her previous husband introduced me to her. I was like, I think you need to go and see my ex-wife. She's a breath worker. And I was like, a breath what? So I went and met her, and that was about 5 years ago, and the rest is history. And I would say that I've had awakening after awakening after awakening after awakening, through breath work, through getting back in touch and actually managing to feel that feeling, and feel safe in it, in my body, and let that move, embrace my reality, my authentic self. And I've honestly gone into, I had a breathe this year, particularly, where I went in feeling like one person, and I was in a bad place, and I came out the other side feeling grateful for my life exactly as it is, and I was just rebirthed into a completely different reality. So it took, to say yes, it took me to get to the end of the bottom, you know, the bottom of my cup in this instance. But honestly, you know, and it's probably been the hardest thing I've ever done, but the very, very best. The very, very best.
So would you describe it as more of a gradual process?
Yes. I've been practicing breathwork now for just over 5 years, and the first breathe that I ever did was in a group. Well, the first big breathe I ever did was in a group, and I just remember navigating to the back of the room and sliding down the wall, crying that I just wanted to die. And it was kind of upwards from there. You know, but on the whole, it's been a like this. So yeah, very, very gradual. There was a lot for me to process.
Right.
And say, like, my life in general, but these things all have links, right? You know.
Right. Yeah, I would say probably that even if there is a sort of a catalyst, you know, like Paolo's conversation with her husband, or the arrival of this woman at my workplace, that, you know, there's a lot that comes into it afterwards as well. Like, it is you know, a gradual process, and like you say, a series of awakenings also that can, you know, that happen after that. Yeah. So thanks for pointing that out.
I describe it as a spiral. You know, healing it's a spiral. Yeah, that's how I describe it.
Okay.
So yeah, I had mentioned before that I started psychotherapy in January of 2012, and my therapist helped me really grapple with all of the like really unhealthy internal narratives that I was generating about who I was and what my place was in the world, which looked so different from the way I'd obviously always imagined it would be. The intensive therapy work I did led me to choose a path towards higher education. So I enrolled in university when I was 31 to earn my Bachelor of Music degree. I had been teaching private music lessons for about 9 years, loved what I did, but wanted to be better and needed, at that point, it felt like I was trying to fill a void in my life. And so I thought I'll go back to school. I was in the third year of my undergrad when I had a sort of light bulb moment that completely changed my life. I was doing an independent study on the impact of sex hormones on the female singing voice as part of my undergraduate studies. And I had read through hundreds of articles about the impacts of things like birth control and menopause and pregnancy and all these other things, puberty, that females go through and the impact on their singing voice. And I realized on my hundreds of pages of notes I'd written, I opened up to where I had titled a page fertility treatments, and it was empty because nobody had ever done that. It hadn't been looked at, and I felt for myself and for everybody else who had been through it that notion of silencing, which for me it was mind-blowing. I hadn't thought about it before. I'd been so busy with school, I think, that I hadn't been I'd still been in therapy, but I not sure, I was so distracted from what I'd been through that this was like a moment where I thought, wow, this is something I can do. And I just, in my heart, I think I knew it was going to be therapeutic. And so it set me on a path to graduate studies, doing research with the Childless Not by Choice community in line with singing. It's just that's what my life was, and that's how it worked out on this path sort of together. And I realized I just really wanted to advocate for the CNBC community. And the more that I acknowledged and critiqued the ways in which CNBC folks are silenced and stigmatized, the angrier I got. But I learned to use my anger as a fuel for my passion for research and consciousness raising of the experience of childlessness. And so for me, it was, and through graduate studies, I was diagnosed with MS in my first year of my master's. And that was another blow so my progress of becoming completely childless, like that sort of closing chapter, was also kind of gradual as well. So 2011, when the fertility treatments didn't work, 2017 when I was diagnosed with MS, and I had to choose between taking medication that would preserve my cognitive and physical health or trying to get pregnant through more fertility treatments. So I chose my health. And then when I was 39, so just a few years ago, I had a total hysterectomy because I had a giant fibroid that they had to cut me open to remove. It was on the outside of my uterus. And so that was like the closing. But the best part for me was that by that point, I had done so much processing. I had learned to be grateful for my position as a childless woman because of all of the amazing things that came from it, that by the time I had my hysterectomy, I actually had all my best girlfriends who all had children to throw me an "I'm not having a baby" shower. And
wow.
I celebrated the fact that I would, one, no longer have to get pap tests, or smear tests, as you call them in the UK, because that was traumatic every time because of all the IVF. It also meant that I no longer had a monthly reminder of the fact that I was not pregnant. And so for me, I found my hysterectomy was a reason to celebrate. And that kind of, like that was the closing chapter. But by that point, it was like throwing the book in the fire and dancing around it naked. Like I was like so happy to be at that point. Yeah, at that point. Yeah.
Wow, that's really quite inspirational, because this moving forwards is not just sort of, following our passions or whatever, and which is great, but it's also even actually celebrating the fact that, you're childless, and having that kind of support from your friends too is really amazing.
Yeah, I was very, very lucky. I mean, I spent a lot of time and energy nurturing my friendships including going to their baby showers, spending time with them and their children, even when it was difficult, but also being open with them about the fact that it was difficult. And they learned to, obviously, like, they appreciated that, and they learned to get a better understanding of my situation through it as well. And it did bring us in many ways closer together as friends for some of us. Some of it had the opposite effect, and that's just what happens. People come in and out of your life for a reason, and you just have to I think we just as humans need to understand that we're not always going to, people aren't always important in your life for a long period of time. Sometimes it's just for a short period. But yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you all so much for sharing all of that. I think that this moving forwards, like I said, process is something that's, continuing. It's not, it just stops here. That's, still continuing till today. I mean, as far as I'm concerned in my particular life. So, that kind of brings me to the next question, which is, how would you describe your life now? And how would you describe your relationship to your childlessness at this point?
I can go first with that if you want.
Sure.
So, over all these years working with the same psychotherapist, I learned to figure out the kind of person I want to be and how I want to function in this world. Life isn't fair. And like most of you, I've been blindsided by some really difficult things in my life. And I made a conscious choice. I knew that I could live the rest of my life miserable, jealous, always pining for the thing that I wouldn't have. Or I could choose to practice gratitude for the things that I do have and use that mindset to make positive change for myself and subsequently for others through advocacy work with the Childless Not by Choice community. It wasn't an easy choice, but because I also chose to lean into vulnerability, I've developed a capacity for joy that I never imagined possible. I've carved out a meaningful and fulfilling life for myself that I'm grateful for every day. And when I say meaningful and fulfilling, I'm not measuring that by how others perceive my life.
Mm-hmm.
My life is meaningful and fulfilling to me, which is all that matters in the end.
Right. That's a very good distinction, by the way, because I think we often measure our lives by what society tells us is meaningful. And as childless women, I think we kind of have to figure that out for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. You can't, no one can do that for you. You have to know in your heart what meaningful and fulfilling looks like for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to get to a point where you don't care what others think about how you live your life. And as childless women, we live, and for other, non-binary folks and for childless men as well, we live our life going against the grain, if you will. My therapist once, the best thing my therapist ever called me was a salmon. And it's something
That's
that
a good
I
metaphor.
absolutely, yeah, right. We swim against the current. And I celebrate that now. I celebrate that because I look at people who swim with the current and who are often not happy. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm filled with joy every day because I live my life against the grain. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Swimming against the tide. I feel happy. I choose what to do each and every day, and I don't spend time or energy anywhere where I'm not wanted. Every day for me is a school day. The childlessness is part of my identity and it's part of my history, but I'm far more than that. Like the myasthenia is part of who I am. That's where I am at today.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I want to clap everyone.
Yes.
At certain points I'm like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
As we go through, particularly something that you said there, Laura, about, it doesn't matter what other people want for us or think for us or anything. It matters what we think and what we feel and what we want. So I just really wanted to echo that. So thank you for bringing that today. I have a couple of notes on this one because I was like, I'm going to get overexcited. So I would describe my life as a beautiful work in progress at the moment. I'm a very bright person, my life is full of positivity and childlike curiosity is how I try and go around my life now. Things that I think I would used to see as bad before, I view them more of an experience, things that I can learn from. I go around a lot saying every upset is a setup, it's an opportunity to look at what's really going on and how I can help myself feel different about it without needing anyone else to change. I truly believe that we all have a purpose in life. I'm massive on diversity and inclusion. So I think that there is a big need for people that are parents and a big need for people that aren't parents and a big need for every type of person in this world. We're all here playing a part, keeping things moving life forwards in whatever way it's meant to be right now. So yeah, I spend a lot of time considering the role that I play on the planet. I have a few creatures here, worms and dogs and mice and tortoise, and they take a lot of nurturing. And I think being a breath worker, a lot of my nurturing goes into my clients. It's really nice, there's different ways that we can exercise the different parts of ourselves. We're all made up of so many different parts of our personality and our archetypes. So I find that super interesting. So yeah, I have a very full and varied life, but I take time regularly to stop because I recognize sometimes if I'm in the doing, then I'm doing to avoid something, like feelings or something that might be difficult. So I tend to do. So I stop regularly. I'll give myself a breathe, or I'll go and I've got obviously lots of peers, and they'll breathe with me and just stop and just check in with myself if anything's going on. So it's full, it's adventurous. There's a lot of love in my life, and it comes in all forms, and I don't say no to any of it. And I think that's really important. So yes. And I went with some of the notes there, but not all of them. But I feel like that's what I've got in this moment.
Okay, well, that's great. In terms of me, well, since I finished my PhD, there was the pandemic, and then my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer and advanced dementia, and I went back to British Columbia, where I'm originally from, and to be one of her caretakers, and then came back to Montreal. And I've been dealing with a lot of health issues in the last year or so, one thing after another. I don't know, it's maybe turning 60s. And the key to that, I'm not sure, but and I also live with somebody, and this person also has had a lot of health issues. He was hospitalized for 2 months recently, and I've become like a part-time caretaker to this person as well. So, I guess it's just to accept, as Laura was saying earlier, life is not always fair. Life can be unfair. And there's always challenges of one kind or another, whether we've got children or we don't have children, and it's up to me to, accept life on life's terms, basically. And while at the same time, affirming what I do have. And that's, I think, something that's being echoed here as well, and I think overall, I feel a lot more confident in myself than I did previously, because, I was feeling like a failure and I can't do anything right. And I was an alcoholic and this and that. But today it's like, wow, I proved it to myself. I did these things, that took a lot of effort and a lot of time. And I'm not just talking about the academic stuff, being there for, a dying mother day in, day out. To be in that situation is very, very challenging, and it's a very painful experience. But I was steadfast, with my friend too. I'm steadfast. I show up. I step up to the plate, And so all of these experiences have proved to me that I've got some good stuff inside me, and I can concentrate on that, and I can focus on that, and I can focus on, what I do have, as somebody mentioned, and what I can do, and how I can contribute, because, there was this big interview that happened a day or two ago in the States with Oprah, and she had this guest on, and I can't remember her name. She said, you don't have to push out children like biologically to push the world forward. I think I'm paraphrasing it, but that's more or less what she said. And that's how I feel. There's so many ways that I can contribute, through my writing, through my caretaking, through my poetry, through doing webinars, and if I keep the focus on that, I'm usually pretty good. It still happens sometimes that I can be reminded of what I don't have. For example, when I visit my brother with his 7 kids and 10, 12, 13 grandchildren, they just keep on coming. So I can't lost count. And when I'm in that environment, yeah, it is difficult, because I can't really contribute to the conversation. I don't have that experience. That's their world. And I do feel a certain level of alienation. But I can take care of myself, like, for example, if I go there, I'll take somebody with me. So I have somebody that I can relate to, or, I make sure that I don't stay there too long. So, if I know that there's going to be a trying kind of situation coming up, I can try to, take care of myself within that context. And, but I can, these days anyway, it doesn't take me a long time to refocus. Even if I do, oh boy, I missed out and I don't have that and whatever, and get reminded of that. Yeah, and sometimes I still feel sad. Like I lost my mom. I'm always going to feel sad about losing my mother. It's a loss. And there might always still be in my heart a little bit of piece of sadness somewhere about the fact that I can't have children, I couldn't have kids, But it doesn't mean that I have to live there. I can maybe stay there for a little bit, but then I can refocus on what I do have. So I think that, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm extremely grateful for being able to make that shift, even when I'm confronted with situations which can be a bit challenging, So I think we're coming up towards the hour. So does any of you have any parting words of hope, or for people who still might be struggling with this issue with their childlessness?
I'd like to say something. I came up with an acronym, which is
Cool.
STONY. Forgive me for that, but
no, I love it. I'm a poet. I love stuff like that.
So S, some of your worst fears did come true, but most did not. T, today is not every day for the rest of your life. Tomorrow may be different. There is comfort in sharing with like-minded women in companionship. Oh, one day you will thrive. One day you will put those broken pieces together and they will be the most beautiful part of you. N, no one goes through life without some trauma or drama or heartbreak. And then Y, final letter in Stony, you will survive this. You are enough. You are complete. You're not irreparably broken. You have survived every bad thing you ever experienced, and you are amazing.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Can you remind me what that spells out? I was having a bit of difficulty following the first letter of it. Stony,
So
is that
Stony, what it? STONY.
Okay, and what does that word mean for you, Stony?
Well, it actually means like difficult, hard, Stony.
Oh, I see. Okay, I get it. Thank you. Wow, that's really beautiful, Paolo. Thank you for sharing that with us.
I have got notes on what I've said, so that can be available afterwards. And if anybody wants it, I have actually posted it into the corporate group that I run, so it is available there as well.
Yes, I saw it there earlier today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've put together a little something, which is just that your life is your own to do with what you want. You're the one who gets to make the choice about what you want your life after childlessness to look like. You choose. You choose how you want to function in this world. You get to decide what's meaningful and fulfilling for you. Life's short, and I believe you only get one. I don't see a point in spending it wallowing in self-pity or self-hatred. Our childlessness may have been out of our control, but not every aspect of our lives has to be. We do still have choices, even if it doesn't feel that way sometimes. And those choices aren't always easy, but we're worth the effort. We're worth leaning into vulnerability and taking risks to carve out a life for ourselves that might look very different from our original plan and different from those of the majority. But different can be amazing and joy-filled and meaningful and fulfilling.
Thank you, Laura. I'll just dovetail with what you were saying about it is our life, and as much as I possibly can, I would say, focus on yourself. If you're at that part where you're still grieving, grieve. This is your life. This is your grief. You have the right to grieve it. Even if somebody else doesn't understand why are you grieving or what this is about, it doesn't matter. It's your grief. You're allowed to grieve it. You owe it to yourself to do that, as a matter of fact. And, talking about owing it to yourself, you owe it to yourself to give yourself a chance. If you feel that there's, that's the time to, maybe something is of interest to you, or, a certain thing calls to you in terms of pursuing a certain endeavor, a certain educational path or a career path, or just, in terms of your hobbies or, pastimes or whatever, just give yourself a chance, and try. That's the plunging ahead little girl part of me coming out saying, just try it. I think there is a big advertising thing back in the day that said, just do it. I don't remember what that was about, but so just, yeah, you're worth it to give yourself a chance.
So mine's really, really short and sweet. And it's basically, remember that we're all in this together and you're not alone. You're perfect, you're intended, you're needed, you are loved, and we are in this together. Let's just lean into one another.
Oh, that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. I just want to add to that, it's my firm conviction, at least this has been my experience, that we can't do this alone, or we shouldn't do this alone, and thank God for Stephanie and for others who have put their foot forward in terms of allowing us this space to share with others who are in a similar boat, because it all gives us a chance to contribute, which for me is a great thing, to contribute to the bigger picture, or to the greater good. We all have something to contribute. And yeah, I think that is my words on that. So I don't know if anybody else wants to have a final word. There is a question in the chat I saw. I don't know if we have time to answer it. Yeah. Somebody asked about, are we still tempted to drink, blame ourselves, or to have suicidal thoughts? I can answer for me. I haven't had a drink in over 28 years. And, no matter how hard life gets, there's this little voice inside me that says, there's no way I'm ever going to let myself go back to that place that I was at. There's just no way. I would rather die than go back to that place. And I will not do it. So I think there's the rebellious, ardent or whatever part of myself that's just, no, that's not going to happen. So no, I'm not tempted to drink, to answer the question very succinctly.
No, I think also for me, my worst moments were so many years ago. I'm not the person I was then. I don't think like she did. I don't feel like she did. I don't live like she did. So, no, that to me is history.
Mm-hmm. I sometimes I'll have a drink, probably no more than 2 ever. But I want to be super clear when I say that it's not to dampen down feelings. Like if I'm going out and I'm going to go dancing, so I'll allow it to enrich an experience. But I haven't had a hangover in 5 or 6 years. So yeah, I'm very, very careful to never do it. If I'm feeling strong feelings and sadness and whatnot, I'll do whatever my body and my process needs to do. I'll just embrace it. I had a big instance this year with a pregnancy in the family. It's the first one since my own. And I went to bed for about 3 days. And cried and lit candles and just fully embraced it till it passed, and it did pass. So I don't drink for that stuff anymore, but I do lean into people for support, and I do allow myself to feel exactly how I feel in that moment. You know, my feelings are innocent. I just remind myself of that.
Yeah, and I'd like to build on what Rachel's just said about, having this experience of 3 days in bed, is that regardless of how joy-filled my life is and how meaningful and fulfilled, it doesn't mean that there's not still waves of grief that come and go, because I work so heavily and deeply ingrained in the Childless Not by Choice community. When I'm presenting at conferences, for example, my research, which is very much involved, and I'm very vulnerable in those. I always tell my whole story. I always cry at conference presentations. Just did in Finland this summer twice. People, I just say, this is my story, this is my life, and it's just part of who I am. But I just think for me, it's knowing that I can live really honestly a joy-filled, meaningful, fulfilling life and still have waves of grief that I now know how to manage, because I sought the help that I needed and the support that I needed. And that can look different for everybody. For me, it was psychotherapy, and it was friends, and it was connecting with the Childless Not by Choice community. And that's the support that I have. And it helped. It's given me the tools to manage my grief. So, yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, that was actually another question, is how do we deal with our grief? Is it like never ending and whatnot? And I think in my case, like I said, I lost my mom. I'll always be sad. I'll always miss the fact that she's not here, and there will always be a small little place in my heart, or perhaps a bigger one, depending on the circumstances, that reminds me of what I could have had potentially and didn't, and I can feel sad about it. And sometimes I do have to, like I said, give myself the space to sort of process the feelings of alienation or the feelings of sadness. I also think support is really essential. Like, I do have a therapist, and I do have support groups, and I do have support people around me. I live with somebody who's very supportive. And like I said earlier, I don't think any of us do this alone. If you want to thrive and move ahead, I mean, perhaps some people can do it entirely alone, and all the power to them if that's their story, but it certainly hasn't been my experience, whether it means in that initial moving forwards process or even today. So I think I've covered the questions. There was just those few questions in the chat. And if there's no other part of
marriage, sorry, Sandy,
Okay.
there's one about marriage.
Oh, how did your
marriage is
relationship survive the childlessness? Okay, I mean, mine didn't, but if you want to answer that.
I had to spend a lot of time on forgiving my husband, because I blamed him a lot, I did. And I had to forgive myself. So once I could get through the forgiveness, and then it's just been kind and patience and thinking, right, yeah, this is where we're at, let's move forward. And yeah, I would say things now are very good. It did take intention, it did take work, but we got through it.
Yeah, very similar actually to Paolo. So and we answered on the sort of the Q&A there as well. I had to stay in my own backyard. All blame is off track. So I was I had to keep coming back to myself, because I had a lot of sort of blame initially. I was angry at everyone, so I had to keep coming back into my own corner. What is it in me that I need to heal, that I need to face, that I need to do to make me feel better? Because the only person that can is me. And there was a lot. I had to breathe a lot to not hurt my husband at points, but I think we all have this in relationships. But just, keeping coming back to compassion, and for myself and for him. There's been a lot of communication, and it's a journey. Again, this sort of thing is a journey, isn't it? You get dealt curveballs, but if you want to be in it together, I think communication is probably one of the biggest things, because you can never tell where the other person is. You might think but you're always putting your own lens on it. So being able to communicate your authentic position and breathe and listen to their authentic position, and not take it personally, because it's something that's playing out for them, has been massive for me.
My marriage survived the childlessness initially. It was actually the growth and evolution of myself that came from my childlessness that ended up moving us apart, and so we divorced last year. Which is an interesting thing because it's I suppose you could say it's almost due to the childlessness, because I went and did a master's and PhD based on childlessness, on my childlessness, on my experience of childlessness, and that how the drastic way in which I changed in terms of who I am and how I function in the world is ultimately what led us to amicably separate. So yeah, that's, I don't know, but the initial, it was really, really hard. We didn't communicate, and then it almost destroyed our marriage. And then we rebuilt while I was full-time in university and working and living away and commuting and all these things. So, you know, it's amazing what a marriage can survive. Absolutely. I say our marriage was successful through that. And then it was not after that, just for sort of weird other reasons, I guess, but also similar reasons.
Okay, well, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up at this point. You know, Laura, Rachel, and Paolo, I thank you so much for having accepted to share, you know, your experience, strength, and hope with the Childless Not by Choice community, with the public, and with me. You know, I feel like really inspired by all of your stories and all of your experiences. And I also just really want to thank Stephanie so much for, you know, accepting this webinar and giving me a chance. There we go. To, you know, take part and host this webinar. And I think that's about it. So we'll call it a day, as they say. So I really wish you all the best, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.